Now Mabrey and Mitchell get into it. Kelsey Mitchell getting into Mabrey's face afterwards and saying,
"Seen her interact with a player like this."
Yeah. Said, don't blink and do that again. And Rebecca, you are so right. Kelsey Mitchell.
Remember when Marina Mabrey caught Caitlin Clark with a hard body check last season, right after Clark had been poked in the eye? Mabrey wasn't ejected, and that moment stayed with Fever fans long after the game ended. So, when Indiana faced Mabrey again in Toronto, the matchup carried a little extra tension. This wasn't simply another game on the schedule, it felt personal, and Sophie Cunningham and Kelsey Mitchell made sure Mabrey felt that intensity before the night was finished. But after everything that happened, the question remains, does Marina Mabrey still belong in the WNBA? Let me know what you think in the comments below.
Mabrey came in with a bump.
And Mabrey's day is almost assuredly going to be done. But both teams.
Let's go back to the moment that Fever fans still haven't forgotten. Caitlin Clark had just taken a finger directly to the eye from J.C. Sheldon, leaving her blinking and trying to regain her vision for a moment. She was still recovering and finding her balance when Marina Mabrey suddenly came across from the side in her Connecticut Sun uniform and delivered a hard body check that appeared completely unrelated to the play. And somehow, there was no whistle, no flagrant call, and no ejection. Nothing.
Marina Mabrey comes out of nowhere and chucks her to the floor. Now let's watch this in slow motion. Here, J.C. Sheldon is guarding Caitlin, swipes her in the face. There's one. Going for the ball, swipes her in the eyeball. Caitlin's gonna have to start wearing goggles. And then Caitlin pushes her off of her, like, why are you still in my face? Marina Mabrey, bat out of hell, chucks Caitlin Clark to the ground.
That's exactly why the moment stayed with so many people. It wasn't one of those borderline plays where you could watch the replay and understand why the officials might have seen it differently. Caitlin Clark had already been hurt and was still trying to recover when the contact happened, yet there was no immediate response from the referees. No ejection, no warning, and no apparent punishment. Just a disturbing sequence playing out on national television, while one of the WNBA's biggest stars took another hard hit and the whistle remained silent.
Clark just is able to lead Mitchell so beautifully on those back cuts.
Sky to Shed, Clark can't lay it in, and it's out of bounds off of Toronto.
Got to shed it front, but having her arm right in Caitlin Clark's neck.
Clark was looking for the offensive.
And it wasn't a one-time thing either. Mabrey built a reputation for grabby, physical, borderline defense specifically when guarding Clark. The kind of stuff that lives right on the edge of a foul without ever quite crossing into one that gets called. Extra contact on screens, a hand that stays a little too long, positioning that always seems to end with Clark on the ground. Fans noticed the pattern long before this next matchup ever got scheduled.
Kenny Benlay able to lay it in. There's Clark turning the corner. Gets denied. The follow is good from Billings.
That clip didn't fade away once the game was over. It was cut up, reposted, and debated for months, popping up across countless Fever recap and reaction channels. Fans even slowed the footage down frame by frame, trying to understand how the officials could have missed the contact. And from that point forward, whenever Marina Mabrey's name entered the conversation, that play usually followed right behind it. For a lot of Fever fans, it became the defining example they point to whenever they talk about Caitlin Clark taking a hard hit and getting no response from the officials.
Benlay able to lay it in. There's Clark turning the corner. Gets denied. The follow is good from Billings.
And that play wasn't viewed as an isolated incident either. Over time, Marina Mabrey developed a reputation among some fans for playing Clark with an especially physical, hands-on style of defense. It was the kind of contact that seemed to hover right around the boundary of what officials might call, but often stopped just short of drawing a whistle. A little extra pressure on a screen,
a hand lingering longer than expected, or defensive positioning that somehow seemed to leave Clark hitting the floor. Whether every individual play deserved a foul was constantly debated, but Fever fans believed they were seeing a pattern, and that perception had already been established well before Mabrey and Clark were set to meet again.
All season, Clark has not been afraid of the physicality this season.
Clean up top, but certainly not down below. Izzy Harrison gets her, you see, like right in the midsection, leaning into Clark, so it looks clean up top, but that is certainly a foul.
So when Toronto and Indiana took the floor on August 18, 2026, this meeting carried a lot more weight than a normal matchup between Marina Mabrey and Caitlin Clark. It was their first game against each other since that controversial hit, and the physicality showed up almost immediately. Clark took contact around the throat without getting a whistle, was grabbed while driving, and was knocked off balance more than once, while some calls appeared to go against her instead of addressing the contact she was receiving. For Fever fans, it felt like they were watching the same story unfold all over again, and this time it was happening live inside a sold-out Toronto arena, where the crowd was loud, the tension was building, and by the end of the night, the attention would turn toward one of their own players.
Mitchell underneath with the reverse.
It's like you get on an island and then let Kelsey Mitchell take it under 10 on the shot clock.
Here is Mitchell's shot clock at 12. Oh, she hits a three. Kelsey Mitchell on fire.
Here's a strange detail that made the night even more unusual. Scotiabank Arena, the home of the Toronto Tempo, reportedly didn't have functioning air conditioning for this August game. Think about that for a second. A professional basketball game where players are constantly sprinting, defending, and battling for 40 minutes, all inside a building that wasn't properly cooled. Whoever was responsible for that arena either completely underestimated the summer heat or forgot just how much it would affect the players. By the end of the night, nobody inside needed an explanation. The impact was obvious. You could see it almost immediately, with jerseys becoming soaked, players wiping their faces every time they headed back up the floor, and routine passes becoming harder to handle as sweaty hands made the ball increasingly difficult to control. By the second quarter, the fatigue was becoming even more noticeable, especially for Fever players carrying heavy minutes. And this wasn't simply an uncomfortable detail happening somewhere in the background. The heat was becoming part of the game itself, affecting the pace, the players, and eventually one Fever player more than anyone else.
Shot clock and game clock essentially level. Fever can take the last shot of the quarter. Mitchell the fake. Mitchell right up the gut and gets it to go.
Come on,
Kelsey Mitchell putting on the moves. Mitchell, jitterbug, into the teeth of the defense, and one. How did she do that?
second in the league in scoring behind Asia Wilson.
Mitchell launches and buries a three.
Come on.
That player turned out to be Kelsey Mitchell. For the first 3 quarters, she looked almost impossible to slow down, pouring in 16 points during the opening period alone and building toward an incredible performance. Indiana quickly created the type of cushion you would expect against a Toronto team carrying an 11-game losing streak, at one point stretching the advantage all the way to 17. Everything suggested the Fever were headed toward a comfortable road victory. Toronto had every reason to collapse under the pressure, already trailing by a wide margin, dealing with exhausting conditions inside their own arena, and facing an Indiana squad that seemed to be operating at full speed. Yet instead of folding, the Tempo kept fighting.
Remember those.
Here's Clark. Step back three is good.
Drive into the basket on this possession. The previous one, she's just a little step back going left. We've seen it so many.
Instead of letting Indiana run away with it, Toronto began chipping away at the deficit. Their comeback wasn't built around suddenly getting hot from the perimeter or discovering some magical offensive rhythm.
It came from repeatedly attacking the offensive glass. The tempo finished with 18 offensive rebounds, turning those extra possessions into a 22-9 advantage in second chance points. Plays that should have ended with Indiana securing the ball and getting out in transition instead became additional opportunities for Toronto. Sometimes a second shot, sometimes a third, and occasionally even another attempt after that. Every extra possession slowly pulled the tempo closer. What had looked like a comfortable blowout was suddenly turning into a fight, and the extreme heat inside the arena was becoming another factor. As the third quarter continued, Indiana's rotation became more limited, the substitution options got tighter, and some of the Fever's shot selections started looking more rushed than usual. Then came the moment Indiana absolutely didn't need. Kelsey Mitchell, who had been carrying a huge portion of the offensive workload, was forced to leave after 3 quarters and did not return. Coach Stephanie White explained afterward that Mitchell appeared to have simply become overheated. It was not the same issue as the injury that ended her 2025 playoff run, but overheating can still become a serious problem, especially under those conditions. And inside an arena without working air conditioning, it was exactly the kind of risk that could surface when a player had spent nearly 30 minutes running at full speed. Caitlin Clark acknowledged afterward that Indiana definitely felt Mitchell's absence, and it was obvious why. Once Mitchell headed toward the locker room and never returned to the bench, the Fever suddenly had to find a way to close out a game they had once appeared to have completely under control.
Here. Harris, Cunningham, splashes home a 3.
So the question hanging over Indiana's bench for the entire fourth quarter was pretty straightforward. Could the Fever protect their lead with their second leading scorer no longer available? Somehow they managed to do it, but the finish was anything but comfortable. Indiana was outscored 26-20 in the final period, and the Fever ended the night with 17 turnovers as a team, including 7 from Caitlin Clark. Instead of calmly closing out a game they had once led by 17, Indiana looked increasingly unsettled as Toronto kept applying pressure. The final minutes became messy, tense, and far more difficult than they ever should have been. With Mitchell sidelined, the rest of the roster had to find another level just to get the victory across the finish line, and 2 players in particular were about to become the biggest reasons Indiana survived. Once Mitchell was sitting out the fourth quarter with an ice pack instead of helping on the court, one question took over the entire game. Who was going to fill the massive scoring void she left behind? Fortunately for Indiana, the answer came from a player Fever fans already know they can rely on when the pressure starts rising.
She's got her defender on her back.
Cunningham drills a 3.
Sophie Cunningham has developed a reputation as one of Caitlin Clark's biggest protectors since arriving in Indiana. The teammate willing to get physical, talk back, and make sure opponents think twice before taking an extra shot at Clark. But on this night, Cunningham didn't need to do much talking. She let her shooting make the statement. Coming off the bench, she knocked down all 3 of her 3-point attempts and finished 4 for 5 from the field for 13 points, giving Indiana a huge offensive boost at a time when Mitchell was no longer available. And that efficiency wasn't some random hot streak. Cunningham's 3-point shooting percentage for the season had climbed to second best in the WNBA, behind only her teammate Aaliyah Boston. It was another reminder that Indiana's bench has quietly become much more dangerous than people might have expected.
Crazy. I have never seen Kelsey Mitchell react like this. I honestly don't think I've ever seen Kelsey Mitchell get this mad. Get so mad to get up in somebody's face. What happened? What did Marina Mabrey do to evoke this out of Kelsey Mitchell?
While Cunningham was quietly knocking down shots at one end, the intensity was building in a completely different way on the other side of the court. Marina Mabrey began getting increasingly physical with Kelsey Mitchell, using the same aggressive style that Fever fans had already seen her use against Caitlin Clark. There was contact after the whistle, constant back-and-forth chatter, and the kind of physical play that seemed aimed at getting under Mitchell's skin rather than simply stopping her offensively. And Mitchell is usually one of the calmest players on the roster. She rarely lets opponents drag her into unnecessary drama. So when Mabrey made another swipe and bumped into Mitchell during the third quarter, Most people probably expected Kelsey to simply move on. Instead, something happened that nobody saw coming.
Oh, good going. Oh, Kelsey, missed with the elbow. Get her, Kelsey. Put that thug down. Tell her what's up. You tell that thug what's up. That thug Mabrey. You tell her that's go. Hey, why don't you shut up, thug? Put your finger down, thug. You're just a thug. Come on, Kelsey. Look at that. Don't touch my Kelsey. Don't touch her. Look at that. Oh, look at the scratch. Yeah, give her a shove. There you go. Get right in her face. Oh, look at that. Woo! Wow!
Mitchell immediately pushed back, stepping toward Mabrey and getting right into her space before pointing directly at her and shouting. Viewers attempting to read her lips believed she said something along the lines of "stop messing around," or warned Mabrey that there wouldn't be another chance. The exact wording was unclear, but the message was obvious either way. The officials assessed technical fouls to both players, but the situation had already changed the energy on the Fever sideline. Indiana's bench quickly stood up and rallied around Mitchell before the referees had even finished handling the calls. The broadcast crew also highlighted just how unusual the reaction was for Kelsey, describing her as someone who normally stays composed and rarely allows on-court confrontation to get under her skin. And that was precisely what made this exchange feel so significant. Seeing Mitchell finally reach that point suggested that whatever Mabrey had been doing had crossed a line for one of the league's most consistently composed players.
Position. Clark sidestepping three. You bet! Caitlin Clark's range has cleared customs.
This wasn't Caitlin Clark getting knocked down and then having to collect herself alone like she did back in 2025. This time, a teammate stepped directly into the confrontation and showed that Indiana wasn't willing to let that kind of physicality go unanswered anymore. Fans watching from home immediately latched onto the moment, clipping it and replaying it in the same way they had replayed Mabrey's earlier hit on Clark. But this time, the ending was completely different. Instead of watching a Fever star take contact without an immediate response, viewers saw Mitchell answer back on the spot, while the entire Indiana bench rose behind her. And Kelsey wasn't the only person making a statement that night. Something else was unfolding inside the stands, and by the fourth quarter, it had changed the atmosphere throughout the entire building. Toronto's own fans, in Mabrey's home arena, began doing something that nobody could have expected when the game started. It wasn't a loud chant, and it wasn't simply the usual boos you might hear when the home team is struggling. The reaction became much more personal, specifically toward Mabrey, and once the camera started picking it up, the moment became impossible to ignore. What happened in those stands didn't stay there either. Once viewers realized what the crowd was doing, it quickly became another major storyline from the game, and one that would soon connect directly to what the final numbers on the scoreboard were telling everyone.
Here's the moment that fans keep sharing from the aftermath. Once the final buzzer sounded, supporters wearing Toronto Tempo gear gathered near the tunnel. But instead of waiting for Marina Mabrey, many of them were hoping to get Caitlin Clark's autograph. Kids wearing Toronto jerseys were reaching past their own team's players just for a chance to get closer to Clark. And this wasn't some isolated interaction that happened once and disappeared. It continued as Clark made her way toward the locker room. This was supposed to be Mabrey's home court, her organization, and her crowd. Yet when the night was over, one of the biggest reactions from the Toronto faithful was reserved for the visiting star she had been battling since 2025.
No Niara Sabali, no Julie Alaman. Oh, Clark got bumped, still flips it in, puts the foul. Big time bucket from Caitlin Clark and a chance for three.
Caitlin Clark has gotten so good at getting touches in the paint and then finishing, just absorbing contact.
That tunnel scene becomes even more interesting when you look at the number beside Marina Mabrey's name in the box score. She finished with the team's worst plus-minus at -14. And unlike a highlight clip, that statistic tells you what happened during her actual minutes on the floor. It means Indiana outscored Toronto by 14 points during the time Mabrey was playing, not over the entire game, but specifically while she was on the court. So while Mabrey was battling Kelsey Mitchell, getting physical and trying to get under her opponent's skin, Toronto was taking a hit on the scoreboard during those stretches. And the number gets even more complicated when you look at her individual scoring. Mabrey finished with 22 points, which sounds impressive if you only glance at the box score, but she needed 21 attempts to reach that total, converting just 33.3% of her shots from the field. So the scoring was there, but it didn't translate into control for Toronto. That's what makes the -14 stand out. Individual points can look good on paper, but if your team is consistently losing ground while you're on the floor, that production becomes a lot harder to celebrate.
Able to withstand everyone and secure this win.
Yeah, you know, I want to give Toronto their flowers. What a great environment for women's basketball. It's a hell of a crowd. It's a lot of fun to play in front of. Sandy Brondello's doing a great job. Marina, and now they have Sykes back. Like, I want to give them their flowers because they're a hell of a squad. But you know what? Kelsey kind of went out for a second, so we all had to step up, knock down our shots. We weathered the storm a little bit, and so that's just part of building it and the growth that we're showing right now.
Now compare that with Caitlin Clark's production, because this is where the numbers create a completely different picture. Clark finished the night with 24 points and 7 assists, extending her current run to 6 consecutive games with at least 20 points and 5 assists. That tied the WNBA record she had previously established herself back in June of this year. And the bigger picture makes that achievement even more impressive. Clark's current season and her 2024 campaign are the only 2 seasons in WNBA history in which a player has reached both 700 points and 250 assists. This isn't a statistic shared across a long list of stars. Caitlin Clark is the only player represented on that list, and she appears twice.
Mitchell's performance deserves to be placed right alongside Clark's, because she accomplished all of that damage in just 3 quarters before the Heat forced her out. She finished with 29 points on 11 of 16 shooting, including 4 made threes on 6 attempts. That pushed her streak of 20-point performances to 20 consecutive games, matching A'ja Wilson's WNBA record, and giving Mitchell the longest single-season run of 20-point games in league history. Think about that for a second. 29 points in only 3 quarters. Then she was done for the night. And somehow she still left the game with another record connected to her name. Put Clark and Mitchell's performances together, and you get the statistic that really brings this entire story into focus. The 2 Fever stars have now combined for 20 or more points in the same game 16 times this season. That is the most by any duo in WNBA history, surpassing the previous mark of 15, set by Diana Taurasi and Cappie Pondexter back in 2008. Mabrey walked away from the night with a -14, while Clark and Mitchell walked away having added another piece of league history to their season. Take away all the drama, the physical battles, and the crowd reaction, and the box score paints a pretty clear picture. Indiana survived an extremely hot arena without working air conditioning, lost Mitchell for the entire 4th quarter, and still managed to secure the victory. More importantly, the Fever showed they had enough firepower beyond Mitchell to finish the job, while Caitlin Clark continued strengthening her MVP case. And with Indiana continuing to push toward a serious playoff run in 2026, this game could end up meaning more than just another win. These 2 teams are scheduled to meet again on September 18th, in their first game back from the World Cup break. That means Mabrey will get another opportunity when Indiana comes back to Toronto. So the question is still hanging there. Does Marina Mabrey deserve to remain in the WNBA? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you want more coverage, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss what happens next.